Nearly 7 miles down in the Western Pacific, there is a place so extreme that more people have traveled into space than have ever reached its floor. It's called the Mariana Trench, and at its deepest point, it swallows Mount Everest whole, with over a mile of water still stacked on top. No sunlight, no warmth, pressure that would crush a human body into nothing recognizable instantly. And yet, life is down there. Welcome back to the Abyss Report. Today, we're going to the single deepest place on the surface of planet Earth and asking the question everyone wants answered: what is actually down there?
To understand the trench, you have to understand the fall. The sunlit zone ends around 600 feet down. Below that is the twilight zone, where only faint blue light survives. Past 3,000 feet, you enter the midnight zone, permanent, total darkness for the rest of the descent. Most of the ocean's most famous creatures live within this first mile, but the Mariana Trench keeps going. Past 13,000 feet into the abyssal zone, and then past 19,000 feet into a zone so extreme, scientists gave it its own name, the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the underworld. The Hadal Zone exists in only a handful of places on Earth, the deep ocean trenches, and the Mariana Trench contains the deepest one of all.
The Mariana Trench stretches over 1,500 miles across the western Pacific Ocean, near the Mariana Islands, close to Guam. It formed at a subduction zone, where the massive Pacific tectonic plate is slowly forced beneath the smaller Mariana plate, bending the seafloor downward into a crescent-shaped scar deeper than anywhere else on the planet. Within that trench sits a specific point, a valley within the valley, called the Challenger Deep. Its depth has been measured at nearly 36,000 feet below the ocean's surface. To put that into perspective, if you dropped Mount Everest into the Challenger Deep, its peak would still sit more than a mile underwater. Everest could disappear in there completely with room to spare.
At the bottom of the Challenger Deep, the water pressure is over 8 tons per square inch. That's roughly 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure you're feeling right now at sea level. It's the equivalent of 48 jumbo jets stacked directly on top of one person. Submersibles built to survive this depth require walls of titanium and specially engineered glass, tested to withstand forces that would instantly implode ordinary steel. In 1968, a research submersible imploded during a test dive at a fraction of this depth in under a second, before the crew even had time to react. This is the environment anything living down here has to survive permanently for its entire life.
So the real question is, does anything actually live down there? Yes! Scientists have found small, shrimp-like creatures called amphipods scavenging on the trench floor, feeding on organic material that drifts down from the surface over weeks. Some show visible physical differences from their shallow water relatives, evolved specifically to survive under crushing pressure. Even more surprising, in 2014, researchers filmed a snailfish swimming at nearly 8,000 meters down, deeper than scientists believed a fish with a spine could survive. Its bones are thin and flexible, almost gelatinous, built to bend under pressure rather than resist it, since a rigid skeleton would be crushed. There's a darker discovery, too. When scientists examined amphipods pulled from the deepest point on Earth, they found microplastics inside nearly every single one. Human pollution has reached the single most remote point on the planet before most humans have set foot there. There is nowhere on Earth, it turns out, that we haven't already touched.
The trench floor itself is mostly soft, fine sediment, built up over millions of years, undisturbed by waves or currents this deep. But nearby, scientists discovered something stranger, some of the largest mud volcanoes on Earth, rising from the seafloor and releasing fluid driven up from deep within the planet's crust. And scattered across the mud, researchers have found xenophytophores, single-celled organisms that can grow over 4 inches wide, making them some of the largest single cells known to science, visible without a microscope, quietly existing in total darkness. Humans have only reached the very bottom a handful of times in history. The first was in 1960, when Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh descended in a vessel called the Trieste, becoming the first humans to ever reach the Challenger Deep. It took nearly 5 hours to descend, and they spent only 20 minutes at the bottom before the pressure cracked one of the outer windows. It would be 52 years before anyone returned.
In 2012, filmmaker James Cameron piloted a solo submersible called the Deep-Sea Challenger to the bottom, becoming the first person to make the journey alone. Then, in 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo completed multiple dives to the Challenger Deep as part of an expedition to reach the deepest point in every ocean on Earth. On one of those dives, cameras captured something that made headlines for the wrong reason: a plastic bag resting quietly on the trench floor, nearly 7 miles beneath the surface. Despite these expeditions, we have mapped less of the ocean floor in detail than we have mapped the surface of the Moon and Mars combined. Entire sections of the Hadal Zone, in trenches across the planet, have never been visited by a single camera, human, or submersible. Scientists believe there are species down there that have never been observed, chemical processes we don't fully understand, and entire ecosystems built around chemistry instead of sunlight that could reshape what we think life actually requires to exist. The deepest place on Earth remains, in almost every sense, less explored than outer space. 7 miles down, crushing pressure, total darkness, and somehow life. Fragile, strange, and already touched by human pollution before we ever arrived. The Mariana Trench isn't just the deepest place on Earth. It's proof of how little we actually know about our own planet. If humans have physically stood on the moon more times than we've reached the bottom of our own ocean, what else is still down there, waiting? Subscribe to the Abyss Report. Next week, we go looking for the answer. See you in the deep.